Welcome to Women Disrupting, a podcast amplifying the voice of women who are disrupting the status quo to create a more equitable, united, and peaceful world. When I first met Jane, I was so intrigued by her journey in both her personal and professional life. I just knew I had to share it on the podcast. That's why I invited her on this podcast to discuss her story. Because I think if we hear the stories of women who subvert gender norms that are no longer serving them, then we too can find the courage to do the same. Jane has worked in senior roles leading people across some highly successful corporations. It is fair to say her roles have been high-powered, and like many women in such roles, when it comes to planning a family, some big questions need to be asked. For example, who is going to look after the kids? Traditionally, it was women who made the sacrifices, taking the whole of the parental leave and often changing to part-time hours or even giving up their role altogether to care for the children. Yes, in more recent times, it's more common for the role of caretaker to be split evenly between the two parents. However, very rarely do we see the father making sacrifices in their career to take on the role of full-time caregiver, and then the mother taking on the role of main breadwinner. Well, this is exactly what happened with Jane and her husband when they had their two children. It wasn't easy. When a woman decides to disrupt the status quo and do things her way, she is bound to face challenges. In this episode, Jane talks about how she navigated some of these challenges. I hope Jane's story inspires courage in you to subvert gender norms that are no longer serving you. Enjoy. Welcome, Jane, to the Women Disrupting podcast. I'm so delighted to have you with us today because it came about, I think, in a conversation we had a few months ago that you are, I believe, a disruptive woman in a very good way, because traditionally, and I think it's still the norm, when a woman has children, she'll take the mat leave and stay home for as long as she can do with the children, and the man will take the minimum paternity leave, but then continue to go back to work and be the main breadwinner. However, you subverted these norms, and that's what I want you to speak with us about today. So tell me a bit about when this decision was made.
Yeah. Hi, great to be on the podcast. So, yeah, I mean, thinking back now, it's quite a while ago now, although, time flies and all of that. It doesn't feel like that long ago, but it was in 2017. So I had my daughter in 2012, and then went back to work after 9 months, pretty standard. My husband had a job. He took the 2 weeks paternity leave. That was all he had. And then, so that was quite normal, I suppose, in terms of stereotype. Yeah. And then in 2016, I had my son in 2016, again had around 8 months off, and then went back in early 2017. And so that meant having two of them. We did have grandparents that helped out at the time a little bit, but we did have two of them in nursery when I went back to work in January 17. One of them was in nursery 4 days a week. One of them was in nursery 3 days a week. And the costs of that were more than our mortgage at the time. So that was quite a significant cost. And as we started thinking about the eldest then starting primary school in September, obviously that was going to reduce the nursery costs significantly because she was going to be in school. But we still would have had to have had after school clubs. This was way before COVID, so we were both still working 9 to 5 jobs, out at 7 in the morning, back at 6, traveling to offices, both of us, that kind of thing. So we were definitely going to have to do after school clubs on most days to work around our jobs. So the costs weren't going to reduce that significantly. And we realised those costs were marginally around the same as what my husband was earning at the time. So it just felt a bit crazy, really, to spend that money to live a life that was very busy and that was constantly around dropping off and picking up. And we thought, actually, could we do something quite different here? But it was a big decision. It was really a big decision because actually my husband stopping working was like quite, a novel thing to do, I think. Talking like it was in the 1900s, but, it was only a few years ago. But it did feel a very momentous decision for him to not work at all and look after, at that point, a 15-month-old baby. So he had great trepidation around that, really.
So just to clarify there, have I got it right? Yeah. His salary was the same as the childcare fees. So it was just being sucked up in childcare fees.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. There wasn't much left over. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would make more. So those childcare fees were removed when your husband stayed at home because he was doing the childcare.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of making that decision, talk to me about the reluctance or willingness from both of you in making that decision.
Yeah. I think the reluctance was around identity, like not working, felt like we have strong work ethics, and that's ingrained in our family. So yeah, not working felt like a big thing, I think, for him. For me, it felt a bit like, oh, are people going to say that I don't care about my kids because I want to go to work rather than look after them? There was that reluctance. I think the willingness, though, was, wow, this could really take the pressure off. If financially it made total sense. So on paper, the sums spoke for themselves. If my husband was in a career that he loved and that, he saw a trajectory there and, we would have made that work, even though financially it made little sense. We would have probably continued, but added to it making sense financially, it was also kind of, he'd not really found a career that he loved. He had a job that he loved and a company that he loved and a manager that he loved, but it wasn't a career that he saw himself in till he retired, kind of thing. So I suppose those two combined made it an even more of a no-brainer. But yeah, I think I've summed up the main two reluctances. One was around, identity, because the money wasn't a factor, but it was what will people say more than anything on both sides for both of us. What will people say? What will people think? I think, telling his parents, just things like that. It was more around what will others think. It felt right for us, but it was definitely around that identity and what will people make of this.
And on that note, what did people think?
Yeah. I mean, everyone was mostly supportive. It was like, wow, oh, right. It's so supportive, but very curious and asked some crazy questions. I remember at the time it was like we were doing a social experiment. We were really laughing at some points about the questions. Like some of his male friends just made comments like, wow, Jane must earn a fortune if that's what you're going to do. Because at that point I was rising in my career, but I never talked to anybody about what I earned or, we've never been very lavish or had big flash cars or anything. So it wasn't something you talk about. But all of a sudden, when John's not going to work, everyone then goes, wow, Jane is really a hotshot, isn't she? She's a high flyer and she must earn a lot. And there was a lot of comments around that, which made me, us both feel a mix of emotions, really, like proud, yeah, but also like, oh God, yeah, people are making assumptions about, or had made assumptions before that now they're realising weren't true, or I don't know. So I think everybody knew that I earned more than John, but for him not to work, it took it to another level. It was like, oh wow, you must be. So there's conversations about earnings, which made me feel really uncomfortable, because you never have those conversations with people generally. So that was a bit weird. And some people saying, oh my God, how are you going to cope with that, John? Bit like you're going to go insane, you're going to be bored. There was a bit of that. And then there was a few people to me like, oh, are you going to be jealous? Do you not wish it was you? And I had to be really self-assured and say, no, I love my career. This is amazing. This is going to enable me to work, to be able to go to work, not having drop-offs in the morning is something else. You can actually just get ready yourself and drive to work. That's like amazing. I feel very lucky and privileged to have been able to do that, because in my working career, I've been surrounded by women who, them and their husbands both have big jobs, and to manage childcare around that is, my hats goes off to them. And I never complained about being busy or anything, because I felt like people would say, well, it's all right for you. John's at home and he's sorting the kids out. So, I can't complain about, being busy. But of course, I wanted to come home and put the kids to bed and do stuff like that. And people would say, well, why? Because John's there. And I'd be like, yeah, but I want to do it. It's not like John's there, so I don't have to do anything. Which maybe is different. I don't know, really stereotyping, but that may be different from if I'm a man being the breadwinner working. They might come in at 7, literally sit down and feel like they don't have to do anything because the mum is there to do everything. So I think maybe that's a bit of a difference. And I'm really generalising, and I don't want to offend anyone by saying that, but that may have been a bit of a difference, yeah.
Yeah. And what's interesting is when you say John's not going to work anymore, it sounds like he's going to just sit at home and put his feet up with a pipe and do nothing. But actually, working mums and working dads, not working mums and working dads, stay-at-home mums and stay-at-home dads are, would you say, just doing as much work as the breadwinner? But
Absolutely.
It's just the invisible work, isn't it?
Absolutely. And he for 7 years, because now I'm in a bit of a different situation that I've just had 2 months off because I got made redundant. So we've had another subvert, done the opposite for the last couple of months. And my eyes have been opened. Like, literally, I haven't insured a car, sorted out an MOT, paid a utility bill, sorted out council tax, organised kids' passports. I've literally done none of that life admin, because the mutual understanding between us both has been, Johnny's running the home and I'm working and bringing the money in, so, and that's not to say that I've, of course I've, with more flexible working now, I've made sure I've picked the kids up. I've done more like that, of course, helped to look after the children, but life admin and sorting out the house has definitely all fallen to him. So yeah, he's been really busy. When the first 2 years of him being off, Albert he's 15 months when he first stopped. And then, when Albert started to get the 3 hours of childcare that they get when they're 3, then obviously he started going to nursery a little bit then, a couple of days a week. So that was really nice because that gave John a bit of time for himself. For that 2 years, it was full on with Albert every day, going to the mums and toddlers group, which started to wind me up because I was like, they need to rebrand these groups. So yeah, and he met some fantastic people. There was actually another stay-at-home dad who was into triathlons as well, because my husband's into triathlons, at this baby group who he really gelled with. So that was really nice that he found a bit of a kindred spirit there. But mainly it was women, of course, that he was surrounded by, but he was loving that. He was the novelty in the group and he quite liked that, and he got chatting to everybody. And I remember there was a dark day though in like February 2018 it'd been snowing, and he hadn't been able to go out for about 3 days with Albert. He'd just been in the house and he was like, what have I done? This is crazy. And, similar to those days that I probably had on maternity leave. And I had a real appreciation for him going through that because I'd been through it as well. When you sort of, that was quite good. And I'd imagine if that was a woman and the man hadn't had like 9 months off with children, they might not have that same appreciation, or they might say, what have you been doing all day? Whereas I'd come home and go, right, let me take the kids now. You've had them all day, like he would when I was on maternity leave, So just that mutual appreciation of what we were both going through was good. I had 2 hours commuting in the car listening to radio in peace.
Yeah. What do you think some of the lessons you've learned along the way have been doing this? As you said, it's a bit like a social experiment, but it shouldn't be, should it? Talk to me about some of those lessons learned.
I think that one of the main reasons I said, yes, let's chat about this is to, talking about my experience does make it more normal and does hopefully help people that might be thinking about doing something differently and living a bit differently. That's been my main lesson, really, that it can work, and it can work really, really well. 7 years on, John now works part-time as a swimming instructor. He managed to do the Ironman in Bolton, the big triathlon, because he had that time. So we've both been able to achieve some goals that we wanted to. So that's been the biggest learning, that things can be done differently. You don't have to conform. I think the biggest learning for me as a woman is to just be really proud of my career, the fact that I do work. That does not mean that I don't love my kids. It doesn't mean that I don't spend time with my kids. It doesn't mean that I'm a hard-nosed, power suit wearing person who is devoid of emotion, because that could be the stereotype that some people have. And I think the lesson for the kids, there've been some conversations that we've had along the way that have been fascinating, where the kids might say something like, oh, well, the mums do that. And I go, well, do the mums and dads do that in this house? And they go, well, no. And I go, well, there you go then. And so for Albert particularly, I was a young boy growing up. I hope that this, and then Winnie, going into teenage years, looks at our situation and sees John as a real role model, that actually you can have a really supportive husband, really supportive man that brings children up, and so that you can have your career. And I hope for Albert that plays into his life as well, that he shouldn't grow up expecting that women do this and that he should do that we have options, we can do whatever we want. We shouldn't conform to our gender stereotypes. But I think that's been tough along the way for me, and I've learned that. And sat here now at 44, I'm very, you way more self-assured than I was 7 years ago, when I might have been a bit like, oh, what, like I said to you about what do people think of me. It's the lesson I've learned is forget all that. Do what's best for you and your family. And it's easy to say, don't care what people think. Of course it is now, after 7 years, when I can show that this social experiment has worked. But yeah, I think that's the biggest lesson. Just be true to yourself and do what is right for you and your family.
Because I was going to ask, what advice would you give to maybe mums who would like to have a shot at this? Because, there's lots of things that you've talked about, like the projection of mum guilt. Maybe you don't start with the guilt, but people project that guilt onto you. And I just wondered if there was any tips that you've got. I know you say, like, in hindsight,
I know,
you can look back and say, don't care what people think. But is there anything that you did to manage that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, you mentioned the G word, that guilt. And me and John used to have all conversations about guilt all the time, because we both felt it. He felt guilty for not earning anything. I felt guilty for not being around more, or, maybe not being as present when I was at home because I was stressed about a meeting the next day or something, So there was guilt all over the place. And it's just such a waste of energy now looking back. But you're right. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. I think, what tips? Try and use a bit of humour. I mean, I'd get to the school gates sometimes and some of the mums would say, what are you doing here? Where's John? Say, I'm picking my kids up. But you've just got to laugh at that.
Yeah.
That's people making conversation. No one means any harm. But if I was in a lesser confident mood, that may impact me. I might come home and think, oh God, no one thinks I go there. No one thinks I'm around. So try and, use a bit of humour, because it does feel quite different and people will have questions, but try not to take that too personally. Yeah, I think that would be my main tip, really. I'm struggling to think of any more. Use humour. Maybe surround yourself with other sort of women, thinking from my perspective. John might have some other tips, but surround yourself with women who support you and get it. If you are feeling any negativity from anyone, maybe don't spend too much time with them, because they're not your tribe, so to speak. I didn't have that.
Yeah.
I didn't have anyone that put me down because of it. It was just the sort of odd comments that you might get that I'm sure weren't intentional or meant to be hurtful. But if I taken that way, that could have led to some issues from me.
And I guess, do you think this would only work if, I guess, for a woman, if she wanted to go back and focus on a career and her partner to stay at home, if the partner, like your husband, wasn't perhaps in a career that they wanted to pursue for the rest of their lives? What I'm trying to ask here is, do you, to what extent would this work in a couple, in a relationship where both of them were really career driven?
I know. That is, I suppose that's why it's about every situation is different, and do what works for you, isn't it? Because that could lead to resentment. It could lead to, I've given up something for you, and that's not going to be healthy or helpful. So I don't think John ever felt like he'd given up anything. I think he definitely felt like he'd made sacrifices. Like I say, it's not like he hated his job or anything. Like, he quite enjoyed the people he worked with and everything. So I suppose there was sacrifices that he'd made, but there was definitely no resentment. And he definitely feels a sense of purpose in supporting me. And I think that's quite benevolent of him. Do you know what I mean? Like, well, is it benevolent? Would we say that about a woman doing that for a man? I don't know.
Yeah.
Check myself with some of the things that I say. Like, am I just giving him that appreciation because he's a man? I don't know. But anyway, the type of personality he is, he feels very proud. When we look, we go to parent conferences now about the kids, and they're very well adjusted and get great feedback about them. And I often say to him, that's a lot down to you. You have been their main influence now for the last 7 years. Recently, I've been around more due to, more flexible working after COVID. But I'd say for a good 5 years, I didn't get home till 7 o'clock. And I was out from 7 in the morning, maybe in London a couple of days a week as well. It was a really busy time where I worked. And so he was, every day after school, picking them up, tea, clubs, deciding which clubs they were going to do. Winnie started doing piano for a bit, and then got into drama, and he made all of that happen. I didn't do any of that. So he definitely, there's no resentment. He definitely feels proud when he stops and thinks about it. But I think it's too easy to think, what purpose am I adding? What value am I adding if I'm not bringing any money in?
Yeah, definitely. So if you were to, I guess, summarize this experience for me, just to wrap things up, what would you say has been the biggest highlight for you, if we can finish on a positive, of living this kind of alternative life where you are going out being the main breadwinner, your husband staying at home looking at the kids? What's the biggest highlight?
I think the biggest highlight is the realisation the kids have had that we are a bit different, and that's quite cool. I think that's been really cute and made us feel like, it's been worthwhile. So that's been really nice. The impact on the kids, it's been a positive, I think, influence on the kids. The fact, that's got to be the biggest highlight. The fact that they've had a parent picking them up from school every day, that stability, that we're very lucky to have had that, and even in summer holidays, any school holidays, they've not had to go to clubs and things like that. John's been the constant, and he's been around, and we're really lucky to have been able to do that. So I think that's been a highlight. And then my personal highlight has got to be that I've been able to focus on my career and on my work and be able to do that freely, not worrying. Some days John would say, "What time do you think you might be in tonight?" I go, "I don't know, I've got this massive thing, I'm not sure." And he'd go, "No worries, just text me as long as I know what time you're back, so I know if I can squeeze the gym in between 9 and 10 at night." So I'd get in at like 8 or something, and he'd go to the gym after that. So that support for me, being able to do what I needed to do in that moment, being ambitious, wanting to progress in my career, has just, made all my dreams come true, really.
Oh, I love it. It's so inspirational. I wonder, do you know if there are like any groups or organizations that support this kind of thing? Maybe like a group for dads, stay-at-home dads. Is there anything like that out there?
I don't know. Do you know? I don't think there's enough of it. I remember when he first stopped, do you know what I bought him? I don't know if you'll have heard of these, but this woman that I love on Instagram at the time, the Unmumsy Mum.
Oh, right.
So the Unmumsy Mum was brilliant, and I think she's written a few fiction books now, but she wrote a couple of books around. She was kind of trying to subvert the norms at the time of being this perfect mum that cooked lovely meals, that made the kids eat vegetables, and basically a mum that was just trying her best, but sometimes getting it wrong. And I bought him a few of her books to kind of reassure him at times that, I don't know, he's never been on Instagram, so he wasn't conforming to that perfect kind of image. But I don't know. So I was struggling to find positive men role models for him. So I ended up buying him her books. and we used to, I remember us looking actually at blogs, and I think we found one blog of this stay-at-home dad that was quite interesting, but it wasn't very well known. So, I think John did struggle, and I was saying, if it was me and when I was on maternity leave, my days were full. I would meet people for coffee. I'd go around to his mum's for a walk and take the kids. But men, I don't know. Well, maybe not all men, but he's a bit more introverted. He wouldn't necessarily want to sit around drinking coffee in coffee shops all day. So he didn't really go out and build those networks, which is why then the sort of sing and sign and the baby massage or whatever it was really helpful, because it got him out of the house, got him talking to some other adults during the day. And then, like I say, this one stay-at-home dad who ran the toddler group that he started to go to at this church, but that was really cool and made him feel a bit more normal that he'd met someone else that did it. So it'd be interesting if he hadn't have met that guy, because he wouldn't have had any other role models to feel that kinship with other than that one person. And even in the media, and maybe it's a bit different now. I think I said to you when we first met that I definitely see more dads now at the school gates than I did then. John was definitely, in 2017, he was definitely like one of the only dads that would be regularly on pickup. But 7 years on, I think thanks to more flexible working after COVID, there's definitely more males, around the school gates. But still not enough, I don't think. If there's any other stay-at-home dads, and I think there are a lot more now with shared paternity, there's a lot more dads that take, way more than 2 weeks off. They might take 4 weeks, or they might do. I know someone at work actually has just come back, and her husband is doing the final 3 months, which is unpaid. because she earns more. He's a teacher. So that things like that. But even that's 3 months. That's quite a long time, to be at home with a young baby. So somebody should start one. Maybe I need to tell John he needs to start one.
Yes, definitely. And if any listeners have any recommendations of anything, I'll put it in the show notes. It would be great for people just get a bit more organized around this and have more role models. But also, if you're doing something like this, like you say, you need someone apart from your partner to grapple it out with and talk to and that sort of thing. So it's really amazing what you did, a really inspiring story and disruptive, but in a really positive way, because I think, like you said, there's been so many great lessons from this, and your children, as you hear in your parents' evenings, have turned out to be really well-rounded children, which is all you want at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's had its ups and downs, I'm sure, at times. And like I say, what will people think was the biggest fear, but it's all turned out well. And I hope that along the way, even at work, me talking about it, now talking about it helps some other women who might be thinking, oh, let's do things a bit differently, even where the husband might work part-time and they don't. That's okay. That's okay. Just because you're the female doesn't mean that you have to, be the main carer for your children. You don't. But that comes with it, the G word. And lots of reconciling and being clear about what you want and not feeling guilty about that.
Love it. Absolutely. That's a really strong note to end on. So thank you, Jane, so much. You've been inspiring, and thank you for giving me your time today.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. I'm always looking for disruptive women as guests. If you think you'd make a great guest or know anyone who would, then please email me with the details. You can email info@yasminarifcoaching.com. More details in today's show notes. Remember to show up and share your truth, because the world is hungry for women who show up and tell the truth, unafraid and free, expanding to the very edges of who they were always meant to be.